I see what you've done. I know what you're doing. I'm not angry, but I'm disappointed. My people are coming to show you my displeasure.
Spread ego, cross the block. Spread ego, spread ego, cross the block. I fuck the music. I make it curl. I fuck the music with my servant curl. Hit. Wanna be, have no fear, comes and goes, man. This shit, no windows, feels so weird when it blows through my bones. I got a dose for it. Wanna know more, cause it's about what I got to show for it. I want some more of it, I want too much. I got so bored with it, I shot it up. Wanna light my torch with it and get all fucked up. Yeah! What is it, where is it, how will it affect me? Fuck that shit, I need that shit bound to be the death of me. Fuck buying it, I'm taking it and sharing it with nobody.
According to you guys, I did pretty damn well with my rewrite of Far Cry 5, which makes me happy as I was worried it would be trash. I still plan on refining it, as even though the video was 50 minutes long, I only provided a skeleton more than an in-depth rewrite, but that's a project for later. Since I enjoyed the first one so much and didn't fuck it up, I decided to do another, and for that, what would be more fitting than its successor game and glorified DLC, Far Cry New Dawn. For those of you with good taste in games, Far Cry New Dawn was a game released by Ubisoft in February of 2019. It acts as the continuation to the events of Far Cry 5 taking place 17 years after the nuke ending. You play as yet another custom character, the Captain of Security, as you fight a nationwide warlord faction called the Highwaymen to protect a burgeoning settlement of Prosperity in Hope County, Montana. The game was fun for a moment, critically panned and then forgotten, which sucks as this really could have been something. You have a continuation to the story in 5, with a lot of the surviving characters coming back, including Joseph Seed and the Deputy, and it does fuck all with that. The most you get is Kim and Nick not wanting to go to New Eden for help and Joseph being a sad old man. And my god, is there a lot of shit wrong. Plot, characters. God help me on this one. Before I break down what needs to change, I have to lay the things out. 1. The gameplay. 2. Cap. 3. Rush. 4. The twins. And 5. New Eden. Right off the bat, this might be the only thing New Dawn is remembered for. The shitty implementation of RPG leveled loot and leveled enemies and animals. Where you could hit a motherfucker point blank with an RPG in the face, and he'd get up A-OK because he was wearing a biker helmet and motocross armor. It just doesn't fit with the action man style Far Cry is known for. You shoot a motherfucker with a Mac-11 and he drops like a bag of hammers. He doesn't eat that shit because the Mac-11 is a level 1 submachine gun and he's a level 3 enemy. It seems like a completely random decision they made just to be different, right? Well, it's not that simple actually. New Dawn's just one victim of this midlife crisis Ubisoft has or is still going through. Around AC Unity, Ubisoft was trying to mix RPG elements into their games. You remember the clothing with the stats, right? With Assassin's Creed specifically, it's prominent. Origins, Odyssey, Valhalla. I assume the reason they got into it was the idea of selling cosmetics for more money and insecurity over how formulaic their games were/are. It also poorly combines with the Outpost upgrade system, which is the main way I got ethanol in my playthroughs. Needless to say, the leveled stuff fucked the pig, alongside the fact that they had 1 year to make this game, but I think it could have been reworked and not suck. Up next is Cap, or the Captain of Security, the second and probably last custom pro tag of the series outside of the Merc presets in 2. Cap somehow manages to be less of a character than Rook, because even though Rook was an empty homunculus, there were at least those small moments in cutscenes where they Fist Bump Rye or Comfort Hudson. A moment I think really falls through is the mission with Joseph where you fight your sin. You know, the one where you fucking shoot the bear with the explosive arrows. When I was sitting there, I was thinking, what sin? You fight a bear, which is supposed to represent it, but what sin is it? Wrath? That seems kind of bullshit as you get wrath as a superpower afterwards. Plus, Cap is never shown to use violence when it's not needed. It's trying to apply a character flaw to thin air. At the absolute minimum back in 5, when the game tried to apply character traits to you, it was trying to apply them directly to you, the player. Granted, it didn't work since the game was very limited in letting you impact it in your own unique way, but hey ho, I guess it's easier than New Dawn's attempt at nailing jelly to a tree. Much like Rook, I think this is a simple issue that could be solved by making Cap an actual character. Although I do have other ideas as well, I might save them for a later video or something. Speaking of people who should be characters, Thomas Rush, this guy, good old Tommy boy. This is not a character, he is a plot device. Not just any plot device, he is a MacGuffin. Thomas is the leader of the unnamed group Carmina brought to help prosperity. Specifically because he's a really good community builder. The Highwaymen want him for the same reason. You know, until they forget that and he doesn't do anything other than say what he should be doing. All that Thomas Rush does is act as a geck on legs, which sucks, as he really could have been a great character, much like Burke from 5. He's the ambiguous leader of the group Cap is a part of, acts like he knows you, and is supposedly the guy who can decide everything. He's a military vet from before the bombs fell, but that never comes into play. He's got a daughter named Mila back at home, and it's never addressed. They do fucking nothing with him, and expect you to give a fuck when the twins blow his brains out.
You want the stick? Here's the fucking stick.
I think I know how to make him actually memorable, but that comes later. And since I just mentioned them, the twins also got done dirty. Imagine being the first forgettable main villains since the series started. Mickey and Lou are implied to either lead all of the Highwaymen, or be major leaders in the Highwaymen. It's not super clear as they're the only leaders you see, but they also make comments about how they don't want to look like fools in front of the other Highwaymen chapter leaders. It's weird. And with how they act, both come off as implausible. The only time in the entire story you see them act like leaders is the meeting with Ethan, which is in the third to last mission. Up until that point, all they do is roll up, talk shit, maybe mess with Rush and roll out. And then they die in the second to last mission. On top of the lack of action, neither of these two exactly strike me as the type of person who could lead a group of 4 people, let alone tens of thousands. Now, having a brash antagonist isn't inherently bad. Cesare Borgia from Brotherhood was a hot-headed asshole and he still worked fabulously, but he also had historical backing, since he was a real guy. It's made very clear that he's more the power-hungry brawn to his father's brains. The twins, meanwhile, are both hyper-violent, smug, shouty assholes, to the point, even though their names and outfits are different, people get them mixed up all the time. There needs to be some distinguishing factors between them beyond a color scheme, and Lou beating the shit out of people with her helmet. I know what I think should be done, but that's for later. Lastly is New Eden, and by extension, Joseph and Ethan. New Eden was the area of Hope County under control by Joseph and his followers after emerging from Dutch's Island and John's Ruin Bunker, respectively. The majority of it was taken over by Highwaymen, and is essentially just the area where Old Sun Outfitters was. They surfaced after 7 years when Joseph, Depp, and Ethan went to John's bunker to command the remaining Peggies. Afterwards, they began constructing their New Eden, including what was left of the Henbane and as much as they could of the Whitetail Mountains. They were shocked by the continued existence of sinners, Highwaymen specifically, the likes of which Joseph promised would not be in their new world. One day, as they were doing construction in the Whitetail Mountains, Joseph had a vision and fucked off to his damn house for an unspecified number of years, leaving Ethan to lead New Eden until you, the captain of security, swing by, perform a ritual, and are declared leader by Joseph. Afterwards, Joseph Seed acts as leader, telling Eden's Gate to help you in your battle against the Highwaymen. There is no tangible benefit you can see from New Eden's help other than the patrols will talk to you. Only the implied benefit the story says that they give. Almost as soon as you get their help, the twins learn of your deal, talk to Ethan, raid the settlement, and the New Edeners don't move back in. This entire faction is wasted potential. Also, you may have noticed, Ethan kinda just appears in that backstory dump. That's because he kinda just appears. He is Joseph's illegitimate pre-collapse kid with a woman that wasn't in Far Cry 5, was never mentioned before New Dawn, who tried to travel to Hope County after a fucking nuclear holocaust. Oh, and his mom was there too. She died, and so this kid of an undetermined age just fucking toughed it out, didn't get radiation sickness, and found this motherfucker on an island. An island! Okay, to be fair, it's never specified if he came along before or after the founding of New Eden, Joseph leaving the bunker, or any of that. But then again, nothing is specified in the background of this central character with no background in the previous game. You'd think that'd be a little fucking important. I mean, Jesus Christ, this guy doesn't even look like John, Joseph, or Jacob. And on top of that, he's supposed to be in his early 30s at most. A big thing with Ethan is he resents Joseph for never being there for him, and even leaving him to pick up the leadership role for an unknown amount of time. Joseph just doesn't acknowledge Ethan's anger outside of saying, "He wants the apple, but his soul is not pure." And then both of them are just a non-factor until the very ending. And it really fucking sucks, because if Ethan was actually done well and you did some more with New Eden, they could have been downright heartbreaking. But enough lamenting the absolute nothing we got from New Eden. Let's actually get into fixing some shit, and let's start with the gameplay. Even though I only mentioned the shitty RPG mechanics when I was going through this earlier, there is something else I think could change: how the Highwaymen operate. Now, the Highwaymen aren't exactly the most intelligent people on Earth. You could pull one to the side, ask them what the capital city of the UK is, and they'll say England. But you don't have to be too smart to understand basic tactics, or to have what the player takes away from the Highwaymen affect how they operate. Initially, the Highwaymen have everything on lockdown, so they do the irresponsible thing and have their outposts protected by low-level guys. When you take them, depending on which ones you take, it will affect how the Highwaymen operate. So if you say, take Chop Shop and Broken Forge, the Highwaymen response to the checkpoint sending out flares or an outpost signaling will be incredibly slow since they don't have the means to upkeep their cars in response. But on the other hand, if you elect to let them come back, much like in the base game, they'll bring tougher guards and a bigger stock of supplies, but the respective element of the outpost is buffed. Example being, if you take the pantry, the Highwaymen will be weaker, but if you've taken it a few times and it's level 2 or 3 and under their control, they're fast and fit. It might be a nightmare to code, especially considering this would be Ubisoft coding it, but it's a cool idea. On to the stated topic of this section, the guns. New Dawn's gunplay was severely hampered by the RPG shit they tried to push, with guns doing damage based on arbitrary leveling, which breaks any sort of belief in the setting, since in the game before this, a headshot was a guaranteed kill against anyone except the Heralds, and even then, it would drop them to a revive state. Instead, I think there's a better way to handle leveled weapons. Instead of having that dumbass bigger damage number system, the weapons work off of a condition system. Lower level weapons have low durability. A level 1 shotgun would be able to let off 25 shots or so before the durability drops so low it starts to jam. And if unmaintained, it could blow up in your hands with a catastrophic malfunction like in Far Cry 2. Meanwhile, an elite level shotgun could let off, say, 150 shots before any signs of complications. Of course, you could always go to a workbench to maintain your weapons, or possibly even do so on the go, because spending a lot of valuable resources on a gun only to have to inevitably make it again would suck. I think it fits well into the post-apocalypse vibe, but on to the next problem. Captain of Security, or Cap for short, somehow manages to be less memorable than Rook. Sure, Cap has that moment where they throw absolute haymakers on the twins.
There's no hope for you! No future! For any of you!
Get him up, let him get up, let him get up, let him get up.
Oh, shit!
Like that!
But that doesn't change the fact that Cap is somehow more of a non-entity than Rook. Rook was specifically a cop sent after Joseph. They had several lawman allies rooting for them in the story and personally interacted with the Heralds multiple times. Rook had a tangible presence in the story. If Cap was replaced with some random survivor, all that would really change is Rush would have less history with you. Joseph's visions have nothing to do with you being the captain of security. Even the leader of Prosperity, Kim, sends you out to do work because you can shoot, not because you're the captain of security. Hell, compare how often you see Rook's hands and hear their grunts in cutscenes compared to Cap. One of these two has more presence in the world than the other. This can be fixed very similarly to how I fixed Rook, by giving them a character. To start, a name. I dubbed thee Michaela Woods. Alright, let's go with that. Gonna keep the backstory short since they mean very little in this game. Michaela was a kid when the world ended, and she and her family were lucky enough to survive and find a home underground. Some 7 years later, after the bombs fell, they emerged, starving and in a brand new world. They almost perished, unable to scrape by. But then, a man from the south came by and led them to a settlement, recently raised up by a group working with a Mr. Rush. They were clothed, fed, and housed. Michaela's parents found work in the community as she was taught skills to survive in this post-apocalyptic world. Growing up, she found a proficiency in areas related to combat and team management, even catching the eyes of the man who built their community, Thomas Rush. He offered Michaela a position in his outreach groups as a member of security, where over the years she rose through the ranks, growing her skills, legend, and ego, even butting heads with Rush on how to deal with situations sometimes, thinking she knew best. As head of security, Michaela became known as an asshole with the skills to back up her bullshit. One day in Idaho, while building up a settlement, a young woman contacts them, talking about some group they've traded blows with before, the Highwaymen. They're tough, but from what Rush, Woods, and the rest have dealt with, they're easy to dispatch, as most groups are ran terribly. It'll be a smooth train ride in and out before Sunday. There, you already have a more interesting protag than me grug, me punch bad guy. Plus, considering the game this follows up on, using sins for characterizing someone tracks. I imagine in dialogue, Michaela gets a bit self-assured at points. For example, when you rescue Rush, approaching the mine causes Michaela to radio in that she's at the place. Kim tells you to wait while she sends a squad to meet you and help, but Michaela rather rudely says, "Nah, I got this," and goes about it by herself. Another example could be after the siege on Prosperity, Rush brings up the New Edeners and Michaela responds with something like, "We don't need help from those cavemen." And Rush has to bitch smack her with the reality check of, "We don't have the men to sustain another attack." It also makes a part that comes later actually mean something, but I'm not going to spoil that just yet. And since we were just speaking about him, what about Thomas Rush? At the tail end of my Far Cry 5 video, I said he was so forgettable I had to look up his name despite him being central to the plot, and that holds up. Rush is a plot device, and not even one with actual bearing to the plot. Sure, the twins want him for community building skills, and the same goes for Prosperity, but all that ever translates to is you get to upgrade your shit 2 more levels, and the twins' desire goes out the window for him the second he leaves Prosperity to do anything, because he's immediately captured and fucking executed by them. The only tangible thing that he does to progress the plot is tell Cap to go to New Eden, which literally anyone could have done. There is at no point in the story something Rush and only Rush could do. All he does is act as a plot device, and not a good one at that. You know he has a daughter, right? Her name is Mila, and he carries a friendship bracelet bearing her name in his breast pocket. There's a letter in the train wreck where he mentions her by name. That's it. Cameron Burke from Far Cry 5 was wasted potential, but at least he had those scenes in the Bliss where you saw he was more than just some hard-ass. Thomas is just Mario after the war. Fixing Rush really is just a simple solution. Don't kill him the second he decides to go out and do shit. Have him interact with Cap more often, and let him express himself more beyond "me help people." I imagine him sending you out on jobs to kill VIPs in the Highwayman ranks to disrupt the little leadership they have while he's recovering from torture. And you see it in gameplay. If you kill a mechanic in the eastern portion of the map, stuff changes. Ethanol trucks are parked with Highwaymen trying to fix the engine problem since the resident mechanic got his shit rocked, making it easier for you to get it since you won't be running them down and accidentally plugging the thing full of holes. And once Rush gets better, you actually do shit with him. He could visit New Eden with you as a diplomatic meeting, something along the lines of giving the cult proper medical supplies to help the wounded who are fighting on behalf of the sinners at Prosperity. Or even better, Rush learned of the twins heading to an event somewhere else like the Fighting Pit, and he asks you to join him in an attempted double assassination. It would go a long ways to make him seem not only relevant to the story and world, but also characterize him as the Special Forces badass the writers want you to think he is. Not to mention, with him being a part of the world, he could banter back and forth with Michaela, talking about life back down south, his daughter, and even hints that the Highwaymen worry him since these bandits are prevalent and are obviously more coordinated than he first thought. With all this laid out, making Rush an entity in the story who communicates with the player, makes commands that affect the game world, and does more than just one thing, it would make his capture and execution more impactful. It wouldn't just be remembered by the Ubisofts of Reddit, but by real humans in general. Now that we have been squared away with some marginal improvements, let's head to the most forgettable bad guys of Far Cry so far, the twins. The twins are the first main villains in Far Cry to be forgettable. Even in the OG game, Dr. Krieger had the mad scientist shtick that made him entertaining. But the twins are just a copy-paste of each other with no notable characteristics. You get a hint of distinction in the opening when Lou beats Barnes to death with her helmet. But the little you see of them through the game does nothing to make them seem like separate people. Sure, they are twins, but even twins can have distinguishing points between them. It doesn't help that they only physically appear 4 times and do next to nothing other than threaten people or endanger children that one time. On top of that, they're the leaders of this group, but they don't do any actual leading. Granted, the Highwaymen aren't exactly a forethinking bunch, but it generally helps to have someone think out how you raid the heavily armed community down the road. The solution to these issues is very simple. Give them differing traits, and give them points where they lead in their own ways. An example. You've just left Prosperity for the first time, taken an outpost or two, and over the radio you hear Mickey confused and angry. She realizes who's done it, either by putting 2 and 2 together, or by Michaela rubbing it in Mickey's face, and so Mickey sends a wave of Highwaymen to rock your shit. Or possibly in a mission after getting Eden's gift where you learn Lou is at the fight pit. You disguise yourself, drop in, and try to get a fight with her, beating the shit out of tougher and tougher enemies until she either sniffs you out, or you do actually get a fight with her, only for her to bail after reaching half health. Both scenarios give opportunity for characterization, showing Mickey is the brains while Lou is the brawn. It might not make them top someone like Jackal, but it's something. Perhaps you could even get some butting heads between them. The only time you get sibling drama between them is Mickey feeling guilt over Lou's death. No sibling relationship is perfect, we all know that, so let's add something. As part of entering the region that used to be the Henbane, Michaela has to sneak past or burst through a stronghold on the bridge connecting it to Howling Valley. It's staffed by Lou's top picks, highwaymen she considers the toughest, specifically to stop any of the people from Prosperity pushing out to the east for resources. If you bulldoze through them like the wrath of God, Mickey will chew out Lou over comms for picking lightweights. And if you sneak past them and cause some noise in the region, Mickey chews Lou out for not keeping proper guard of the border. Fleshing them out is something that might require an extra mission or two, which, to be honest, would really help with the pacing. But now that I've done that, let's move on to the last thing I laid out that I take umbrage with. New Eden. New Eden is the most bitch-made thing in this entire game, and it pisses me off. The super violent and sadistic cult from the original game are now a bunch of defenseless cavemen without an aggressive bone in their bodies. Sure, the story says they help you fight the thugs, but you never see it. The only time they fight is on random chance encounters, and the highwaymen always stomp because of course they do. They have actual fucking weapons. I know, the lore says the cult in John's bunker were all that was left, and they were whittled down to being even less due to the place being broken. But you're telling me not a single cult VIP survived to the sequel? Those crosses on their face, they weren't face paint. Those were tattooed on, and I highly doubt they had a tattoo removing laser lying around. The less than a year release date definitely played a part in it, but come on, man. No crosses, no sin tattoos. Hell, the cult in 5 were dirtier than the ones in New Dawn, and New Dawn is a literal post-apocalypse. On top of looking and being weaker, they're also far too open to you. Literally 3 missions, and they accept you as the new leader of their whole fucking civilization. If a civvy looked at a Peggy the wrong way in 5, they'd give them the Eastern Bloc special. But now, if they don't know you, they just don't want to speak with you. Again, I understand they're past that point in the cult plan, but there would always be people who just don't let that joyride go. And that's just the background fodder. This isn't even going into named characters. Let's start with Rook. Giving Rook a character is a bit hard since I'm going with the canon of the Far Cry 5 we got. So I have to say the writers went with the best option I can really think of. I mean, they still could have given an option to input what your sex for your Rook back in Far Cry 5 was, but anyhow, making them a mute who's covered head to toe and 17 years into the cult is a good way to not step on the toes of any player's interpretations of their Rook. So let's move to the 2 silly boys themselves, Ethan and Joseph Seed. The do-nothings. If Prosperity wasn't attacked so early, there would be no reason to visit them. Even after their batch of missions, nothing changes. The whole plot of your character being the new leader of the cult really reminds me of Skyrim, with how, despite becoming the leader of the faction, you don't really feel it, and the game really doesn't act like it. Honestly, I don't even really like the idea of it, since Joseph admitting he's wrong before the events of the game, it invalidates the punch of him admitting he's wrong later after Ethan dies. On top of the whole thing being pointless, there's nowhere enough Eden to get any investment in them, and there's only 3 actual characters, and one is basically just a body. The idea of Ethan is pretty great, a child who's full of piss vinegar and few 2 brain cells lusting after power, but it's executed so poorly. In the first time you meet him, you know everything. How he hates Joseph, wants power, hates you, and is a bit of a spurg, and it's just so rushed.
You aren't what I was expecting. Maybe the same could be said for me. If you came here looking for the old man, well, do you have the book? Do you know what that is? The word of Joseph. His teachings, his guidance, his wisdom, and his madness. I have searched everywhere for this book. Joseph said the one who found it would be ordained by God to be the true ruler of Eden. And you are the one who returns it to us. It should have been me. I'm the one they turned to when he disappeared into the north. I'm the one who has held this family together. I'm the one they chose to lead. I have protected them from the locusts and the snakes. I have kept us all alive and safe within these walls, not the old man, me! My father wanted to build a paradise, but when it got too hard, he ran away. You came here looking for his help. But Joseph is dead. No one wants to acknowledge this, but it's the truth. Our family still believes in him, and they'll never stop believing in him until they understand that he was not a messiah, he was just a man. Help me show them. Bring back proof of his death, and I'll help your people. But New Eden will not allow you to travel north until you prove yourself worthy by lighting the flame of Eden. The people know this mark. And they will lead you to the flame.
Kyle Gatehouse, the guy who played Ethan, did the best with what he had, but it's still just so unnatural. Joseph only exists for 3 brief moments in the story. As a voice on the island, when he grants you the powers that make the game fun, and when you drag Ethan behind the barn. Not to mention, Eden itself offers nothing outside of mandatory story missions. It's not like Prosperity or the Outposts where there's people to interact with or things useful to gameplay. I think I've been complaining enough, let's do something about it. Instead of New Eden automatically trusting you once Joseph says you're cool, let's have some stay detractors. Whether they agree with Ethan for looking after Eden for so long, or if they're just doubting Thomas's, they don't trust you. A way you could fix their opinion is when taking Outposts in the Henbane, you can choose between giving them to the Resistance or giving them to New Eden. If you choose the Resistance, you get the upgrade bench and shit like that, but if you give it to New Eden, they move in, they dress up the place in the furs and the logs, and perhaps they can offer you a temporary buff depending on which outpost it is. So you take the Watering Hole, stroll up to an Edenite Shaman, and you can receive a buff where, for the next 3 in-game days, you run 70% faster. Or if you take Sacred Lumber, walk up to the Shaman there, now your kicks have a chance to insta-kill an enemy. All the while, every time you give a Henbane outpost to the New Edeners, their approval rating grows, and you see them actually fucking up the Highwaymen every now and then at the cost of no upgrades bench and none or less resources going to Prosperity. Conversely, if you just ignore them, they'll still help as Joseph ordered them to, but it'll be more akin to the bare minimum. Moving on, Joseph won't declare you the leader of New Eden. You may have beaten your sin when you fought your spirit bear, but he still doesn't know you, and in this rewrite, he's still under the delusion that his actions were right all the way through like he was in 5. Speaking of your spirit bear fight, I think after that, when you've defeated your sin, this time it means something due to Cap actually being a character. Michaela, before going into this spiritual journey, was a prideful, self-assured ass, but after doing some work with the New Edeners and defeating her sin, she comes out a lot more humble. In missions after gaining New Eden's help, perhaps you come back occasionally for a meeting to discuss something like I mentioned back with the Rush section. Or, fuck, you could gift Joseph a radio and he could occasionally give input or tidbits in later missions, talking about what happened back in the day. It'd give you more impact when you choose to cap him in the end, since it won't be based off of an opinion Cap didn't have the info to make. And since we brought up the last mission, let's talk about Ethan. I think it'd work better if he wasn't such a blatant asshole, but also having Ethan be 17 to 16 years old could make some parts of the story very uncomfortable in a cringy way. There's no getting around the fact that having one of your antagonists of the sequel be the unannounced offspring of a villain from the previous game is a major asshole. So I'm going to do something a bit fucky and push the timeline forward a bit. Instead of it being 17 years after the bombs fell, it's now 23. Ethan is the love child between Joseph and a lucky female cultist during the first game, who isn't heavily specified as she dies during childbirth in John's bunker. Ethan grew up only knowing the post-apocalypse and New Eden, but even without the previous world, he still wanted more from life. One day, around the time Ethan is 15, 16, Joseph fucks off to his waterfall to get messages from God, leaving Ethan to run the commune. Ethan actually does very well and grows to enjoy this power, but that doesn't change the fact that his father abandoned him for what's technically the second time in his life due to prophecy bullshit. When Michaela comes around, Ethan's already a man who's been dealing with the Highwaymen taking territory and killing his own for 7 to 8 years. Of course he's gonna hate you, even if you have the book. Maybe even especially if you have the book. He's been running this ship ever since Joseph left, and he gets nothing while this random chucklefuck brings back the word. He'd love to kill you or turn you away, but even with his father's negligence, the people of Eden will follow whatever the old man wants. So Ethan sends you to light the fire and all that good shit. You could learn all this from Ethan if you go back to New Eden and speak with him, or you could possibly find some scattered notes in his church detailing it, thinking it could be a journal or his own attempt at Ethan's word. I think with this timeline change, it's long enough to where Ethan can be an adult without having to retcon so much lore into the previous game. Long enough to where there's feasibly a long enough time period with Ethan being in charge as the established leader that won't have him start as a literal child, nor have you suspend your disbelief that two people could travel across a nuclear hellscape and magically find out Joseph's location, because holy shit, that was fucking... Back to Ethan. In the game, there could be a few New Eden or story missions where you reclaim holy areas for them. Maybe even tie this in with the outpost decisions from earlier, and it could lead to Ethan or Joseph speaking with you over the radio as you do a side mission to recover something from within the outpost, like a bliss file or a picture of the seeds from back in the day. During Ethan's treasure hunts, he could bitch about how Daddy never came back with the milk, and in Joseph's, he reveals very fucked up things from the last game to Michaela, or talks about Ethan in the most disconnected way that displays that he really knows nothing about being a proper parent. With all our eggs in a row on that front, let's move on to the ending. Honestly, with the changes I made, I think it'll work out better even as is. I think the only thing I'd change is removing the spare Mickey option, since no. Not only is she not worthy of life, it's kinda lame to only have that option for one of them, since neither really get the characterization in the first choice to make that feel like a real consideration. It really just feels like another unfleshed out idea on this game's already massive pile of them. But other than that, I feel the story beats line up pretty well. When Rush dies, you've gotten time to know him and get something out of his doming emotionally. Mickey and Lou feel like more of a presence in the world, and actually have moments where you encounter them beforehand to see their party. New Eden actually has a fucking presence in the story, and the gunplay is not terrible. Perhaps something to bolster Mickey and Lou is they could perhaps send off a splinter party to attack Prosperity, so you have to choose between catching the leaders with their pants down in Eden, or keeping Prosperity on his feet, kind of like the Saints Row 3 ending, but that could get a bit complicated. The already pretty good tension between Joseph and Ethan is amplified by you actually seeing some of it in the game, and by Joseph having a consistent character. When it's all said and done, the Highwaymen are doomed to fate in the area. Ethan dies a tragic death. Joseph's fate is in your hands, as Michaela, now level-headed and experienced, chooses whether Joseph lives or dies. And after all that, the killing, espionage, conquest, and familiar rivalries, she goes back home to Prosperity and has a drink at Rush's grave.
Here's to hope.
Thank God this video is over with. It was a mess trying to get this story halfway decent. Then I got burnout, and it was a whole thing. I also was thinking of doing 2 other possible rewrites that I thought were awesome, but I felt they delved into fanfic territory. If any of you are interested, I might take those on, but it'll have to be after a long break from New Dawn. Even beyond the mess of a story, this game just isn't fun until you get the superpowers. You're significantly weaker than in 5 with artificially tougher enemies. I think for next video I'll cover a movie or something else. Maybe I'll try to make another sci-fi if the corpo bots on YouTube don't have another screechy monkey style shit fit. Maybe I can get together some dudes on Steam and we'll play Left 4 Dead 2 and I can edit that into a funny thing. That game's pretty goddamn good, I'm not gonna lie. If you want a recommendation, here's my recommendation. Fuck no. This game fucking sucks. It sucks so bad I had to dedicate a part of this video to fixing the gameplay when the main focus of this video is on the story. I think I'm good on Far Cry rewrites for now. Goodbye.